Edith, a soft voice called out to her before she continued. If you ever end up alone, don't be discouraged, don't yield to anyone. Forget about the honor of your dead parents, none of that matters anymore, what matters now is you. Think only about how you feel. She ended. The scene transitions to some noble ladies chatting over tea. They bring up the Marchioness and comment that she must be having a hard time since cleaning up the mess left by the former Marchioness's reputation wouldn't be easy. Another noble lady lets out a soft chuckle, her voice laced with mockery as she spits. The previous Marchioness was quite a lewd, extravagant woman, wasn't she? I heard she even seduced the eldest son, Matteo. Soon their chattery is replaced by a scream. The lady who'd had the tea dumped on her trembled, her voice unsteady as she asked what had happened. Without the last bit of remorse, the lady who'd suddenly appeared out of nowhere admits that she reeks, and rinsing off with the tea water helped a little. That soft voice echoed in her mind, the last warm hug she received. She knows people will probably gossip that she's lost her mind again, but she'll only think about how she feels. Definitely. In a new scene, a man firmly grabbed a portion of her hair before throwing her down. Through gritted teeth, he spat that she was lucky. If you weren't blessed with that pretty face, you'd have been thrown out, long ago. She couldn't fight back, she only gripped her gown tightly. Luck? It was more like a curse. If they hadn't been born with that gorgeous face, neither her mother or she would have ever had the name, Reynolds, to begin with. There was a time she resented her mother, she wondered why she just bowed to that man, why she didn't fight back, seek revenge? If perhaps she coveted the position of Marchioness Reynolds that much? Was the reputation and wealth of the Reynolds family really so sweet that she had to bow her head to them, her father's enemies? The man knelt in front of her and asked if she was aware how much it cost to raise her. He pressed a hand on her legs, noting her mother was dead, so it'll be best for her to earn her keep. Something stirred within her, and unlike her mother, she fought back. She bit his hand without hesitation and got a slap in the face as a result. Then he turned away, muttering curses as he left, calling her a stupid wench. Then she realized it, although it was already too late. She realized her mother had no real power, no authority of her own, that her safety existed only because she was alive. Maybe another night, or that night a maid came to inform her the master wished to dine with her. She was startled, it was too soon, and before she could even process anything the maid pulled her up, telling her she'll need to be dressed properly for the occasion. She followed behind the maid, reflecting on how ever since her mother's death she's never been invited for dinner. So now, what in the world was going on? She stepped into the dining hall and was immediately complimented by the head of the house. His children looked clearly uninterested while her mother fumed in anger behind him as he brought up her mother, praising her beauty too. In his words, she'd taken after only her prettiest parts. He offered her a seat and asked her to help herself to whichever meal she pleased. As she settled into her seat, she couldn't shake off the unfamiliarity in everything. After her mother's death, he'd only tossed her scraps fit for dogs. So what was suddenly going on today? The son quickly pointed out his father's high moods, and without hesitation he replied that he was celebrating, of course. He raised his head to look at Edith, asking her to rejoice, since her marriage has been arranged. His daughter mocked her, asking what kind of madman would marry a lunatic like her. Edith tightened her grip. She knew of course he would be a rich man, someone useful for the marquis business, only she didn't expect him to reveal his name the next minute. Duke Myers. He was the kingdom's third prince, and a man so handsome he stole the heart of every woman everywhere he went. And the corner of her lips curled up almost like she was expecting something, and lo and behold, the next minute his daughter snapped. She was adamant it was ridiculous that he'd marry Edith. He was also Lillian's long-time unrequited love. The Marquis retorted that when the Emperor brought it up he didn't think the Duke would actually take it, but for some reason he seemed particularly eager about it. So, he's guessing her look caught his eyes. However, she knew that wasn't true, since when their eyes met at that party, he looked at her like she was furniture. There wasn't even a trace of interest. She doesn't know why he agreed to marry her, but it seemed interesting. Later, Lillian came after her, demanding she reject the engagement. She raised a brow, mocking her further. She reminded her that her fiancé was Duke Myers and asked if she really thought a man like that was for her, if she perhaps thought she'd be able to handle him and his family. She flashed her a defiant look and then without hesitation told her it wasn't any of her business, noting, "She and the Duke will handle it themselves." Lillian just won't stop. She stepped into her face. She remained her. She hadn't even spoken with the Duke once yet she was already acting like his duchess and asked if she realized how cheap and pathetic she looked. But she softly noted it was better than a nobody who meddled in other people's marriages. Those words got her a slap from Lillian. However, it wasn't enough to keep her shut. She fired back again, noting at least she looked less pathetic than Lillian. Lillian raised her hand to hit her again, however this time she caught it. Her voice dropped, her tone sharp as she revealed she never believed her mother's death was an accident. A defiant smile spread across her lips. She asked if she was implying that someone in their family killed her. She told her they only kept her mother in the mansion out of pity, asking what else her mother could do, aside sell her body. She snatched her hand away and as she turned to walk away suggested she be a little more grateful to them. Edith's response was unexpected. She responded that she believed she'd been plenty grateful and followed with an incident. After all, she'd kept quiet about her sending that severed cat's head to the dancer who was rumored to have caught the Duke of Myers' eyes. Lillian gritted her teeth and stormed off while Edith sat alone, her eyes lacking any warmth as she quietly admitted to herself how her life will become hell. She's seen firsthand what comes from a marriage with two people of unequal standing, her mother Ileana Rabbinic. Although the marriage wasn't her choice, the world only ever blamed her. And Duke Myers wasn't just any other noble, he was the king's third son, beloved by all, young and old alike. Meanwhile, she was the daughter of a so-called witch in a country baron. Now branded mad woman. She rested her hand gently on the glass window as she pondered on how her mother always dreamed of revenge, but she never had the power. But she wasn't like her, she'll act differently. Her mother once asked her to look into the sky, telling her no matter how dark it got, there will always be light somewhere. So regardless of wherever she was, she should never lose sight of her own light. So now she'd do just that. Never lose sight of your own light, and seize the authority I deserve. In a new scene, the Duke repeats a word in the form of a question, marriage? The man replies stating Lady Edith is said to be quite beautiful, so she'll suit him perfectly. He first let out a scoff before repeating her name and asking if he thought that insane woman and he would be a good match. The youngest daughter of the prestigious Reynolds Marquisate, Edith Reynolds. A woman of beauty and gentle manners who could easily capture a man's heart. After losing her mother the previous year, she fell into madness from grief. The Duke ran his hand through his hair as he pondered on how he'd never placed any meaning in marriage anyway. He always thought he'd get married out of convenience when the time came, but to think they'd throw at him a so-called daughter of the Marquis, one who isn't even his real child and rumored to be insane. Are they really that afraid I'll surpass my brothers and take the throne? The Duke was always aware their father's affection for them wasn't equal. His two elder brothers were born of his first queen and his one true love, while he was born of the second, a woman he married for politics. As his feelings for those women differed, so did his affection for their sons. The truth stung when he was young, but now, it barely hurts. He considered himself lucky to have been born a prince. He's had his fill of luxury, so it's only fair he fulfills his duty. So he agreed to follow his father's command. Later, a person storms into the Duke's study to confirm whether the rumor going around of his engagement to a madwoman is true. The Duke sat back in his chair pondering on how it appears the rumors have spread even to Edward, who is usually oblivious to society gossip. Which only meant someone was deliberately spreading the gossip. Edward stepped in front of the Duke and reported that they all say she was using his weakness to force him into marriage. However, the Duke immediately denied it. Edward demanded to know what exactly his server was asking, why he didn't know. The Duke let out a frustrated sigh. It wasn't bad to receive sympathy, but being misunderstood as someone with a dirty secret was unbearable. Rather than that, he saw it better to be seen as a man completely smitten with a madwoman. He had to do something to settle the rumor. The scene transitions to Edith sipping tea carefully in a garden. A smile touches her lips and her thoughts immediately go back to how things had changed after the marriage with the Duke was decided. A guard was stationed outside her room so even the Reynolds family couldn't enter at will. Additionally, the Marquis ordered his staff to care for her meticulously, which made her life quite comfortable. She let out a scoff as the thought of him wanting to maintain the image that he's giving his precious daughter away crosses her mind. However, just then her maid rushed into the garden and informed her that the third prince had left a letter. She handed it to her, and as she opened it she hoped silently it wasn't about canceling the marriage. To her surprise, she found a detailed schedule for a date, the next day. Her face immediately went blank. She couldn't understand what was going on, but at least it wasn't news about their engagement ending. Her maid excitedly urged her to reveal what was in the letter, and she responded saying he was asking them to go out on a date. Her maid presses her with a lot of questions, how they'd met, if perhaps they'd met secretly without her knowing. She brings up the rumors, and realizing she's overstepped she immediately goes silent and places a hand over her mouth. However, Edith quickly notices and calls her. She tells her not to be so cautious around her, noting she's the only ally she has in that mansion. Her maid tears up, but Edith doesn't stop there with a smile, revealing she's already aware of what people are saying. The witch who will devour the prince, a promiscuous woman who clings to a man for his weakness, that woman is just like her mother. She couldn't care any less whatever rumors they spread about her. Someone will gain something from their marriage alliance, and she has to coordinate that part well to secure her own power. If she can only avenge her parents' grievances, which, villainous or promiscuous woman, it doesn't matter whatever name they call her. In a new scene, the Marquis steps out to greet the third prince. He wears a cheerful expression as he comments on his early appearance, asking if he was that eager to see their Edith. The Duke replied with a grin. The wedding hadn't even happened yet and he was already getting ahead of himself. He spat. He knew of course the reason for the Marquis' excitement. He managed to reduce the salt tax by half on the condition of the marriage. He directed him to wait in the parlor, adding that Edith will come to him. The Duke went ahead to the parlor as told. However, instead of Edith, the one who came was Frederick. He didn't bother with greetings and immediately asked why he wanted to go through with the wedding. The Duke directed him to the Emperor or the Marquis if he wanted an answer. However, Frederick clarified that he wasn't talking politics, instead he wanted to know his true intentions. The Duke responded with a question asking if he even had intentions. He continued saying he was in a position where he must follow orders. However, Frederick tightened his jaw. He clenched his teeth together as he stammered the words out. You never do what you dislike. The Duke didn't argue more, instead a smile touched his lips as he pondered on how he thought no one would oppose or worry about a marriage decided by mutual interests, but an unexpected person has appeared. The Duke moved to explain. He clarified that it must have been a misunderstanding and stated that he only accepted the duties assigned to him. Hearing that, Frederick snapped. However, just as he was about to question how a marriage could be considered a duty, a noise distracted him and he glanced to the side. Edith stepped in, while the Duke's gaze remained fixed on him. A smile touched the Duke's lips as he finally understood. The second son of the Reynolds Marquis is in love with the Marquis' youngest daughter. Even if she is legally just a daughter of the Marquis, it is still considered scandalous. Then a question formed in his mind: what about the daughter in question? Edith stood in confusion, wondering why he was there and if perhaps he'd come to gossip about her, when she heard the Duke clear his throat and asked that they take their leave. They walked outside, leaving the second son of the Marquis. She sat awkwardly with the Duke in the carriage. He was really handsome. She could see why Lillian was obsessed with him, and most importantly his eyes. She was thankful they were blue. Their words echoed in her mind. "Don't stare directly, it's disgusting." She clenched her dress as she thought of how suffocating everything would be if his eyes had turned out to be green. Just then, the Duke's voice snaps her out of her thoughts. He informs her they've arrived and extends his hand to help her out of the carriage. She complimented the weather and offered to share her parasol, however the Duke just assured her he was fine before walking off. She followed behind him, fuming in anger that she didn't notice one of the bricks uneven from the rest and tripped over it. However, just as she was falling over, a firm hand wrapped over her waist before pulling her into his arms. They held eye contact for a while until she panicked and let go, thinking he'll probably think she's a clumsy and foolish woman from the start. She forced a smile onto her lips to get out of the awkward situation as she retorted that he was just going too fast. In her mind she couldn't help but think, like Matteo, he'll probably blame her if she stumbles. She didn't expect him to pick up her parasol and place it gently in her hand while he admitted he was too inconsiderate, and then he ended with a sincere apology. As they walked together, a thought settled in her mind: perhaps he might be a decent person. If he's reasonable, even an arranged marriage without affection might work. Without it, they treat each other kindly. The Duke suddenly speaks. He reveals that the reason he asked her out on a date is because vicious rumors have been going around about them. Without hesitation she admits if he's worried about the rumors she's gone, however he counters by claiming he isn't. Just then an attendant comes to inform him he's cleared out the 3rd floor. As they walked to the 3rd floor, all eyes were fixed on them and the people showered amongst themselves for the ones who were unaware of who she was. You know, that crazy woman brought by the Witch of Mold. They arrived at the 3rd floor and she harmlessly asked if rumors spread among people really be settled with just one date. The Duke calmly assured her they will, before revealing from them that they'd go on a date at least once every week. Lady Reynolds, for our peaceful married life, you must promise me a few things. Unfazed, she simply asked if that was a contract between them, and he responded saying if she sees it that way it's even better. However, before he continued she asked him a question: why he accepted their engagement. Whether for love or advantage, there must be a reason, but the marriage only brought losses for him. The Duke was slightly moved. She was quite more self-aware. So is she really the madwoman people say she is? He swirled his wine glass gently as he noted that there were benefits to be gotten from the Riley royal family as well as the Reynolds Marquisate, so he accepted it because it benefited both sides. That wasn't the answer she wanted, and as a result she tried to push further until the Duke's voice came through sharp and unexpected, asking her to guess the reason. She raised a brow. She knew he was testing her. She questioned silently what the king hoped to gain from the deal made between him and the Marquis. The king had 3 sons and 2 daughters, the Crown Prince Cassius and the second son Leopold, while Princess Mallory is from the first wife. She recalled a conversation. Leopold is said to cover the Crown Prince's position, relying on the power of his wife's family, the Duke of Cortez. Then it could only be. She asked without hesitation if it was to keep him out of the power struggle, and he admits she's correct. However, she pressed on, admitting she didn't understand it. It was natural to seek a high position when one married into a powerful family, and to secure the Crown Prince's position, Duke Lakent could have married someone as powerless as her, and the Duke casually responds saying parental love isn't distributed equally among children. The Duke, noticing her silence, asked if she didn't have any more questions, maybe why he was being discriminated against, but she just replied that everyone has family circumstances that are hard to talk about. The Duke, however, shocks her again. He tells her it isn't hard for him to say, and immediately begins narrating how the previous queen was a royal maid and the daughter of a rural count's family, and had entered the palace at a young age to serve as a maid and caught the eye of the then Crown Prince, his father. There was a lot of opposition, but they got married eventually. However, the result of their marriage led to sibling conflicts. When his father insisted on the marriage, his siblings tried to deprive him of the Crown Prince title, and in the end, his father had no choice but to kill his brothers. Still, he kept the throne, lived happily with the woman he loved, and had children, but sadly that happiness didn't last long. After the queen's death, his father had no time to grieve. The ministers hurried him into a remarriage, and that woman became his mother. His father may not dislike him, but he can only give different amounts of affection. Edith lowered her gaze. She understood the king's circumstances. He already had to kill his brothers once to keep the throne, so he wants to secure the Crown Prince even if it means marrying his son to a crazy woman. Even if the Marquis pretended to care for her, the king was aware of her position in the Marquisate so well. The Marquis is greedy for money, however, he wouldn't risk his life for power, therefore, she's a suitable match as Grayson's spouse. The Duke checks his pocket watch and suggests they finish the meal and move to another place. She reminded him their conversation wasn't over yet, but he just responded claiming the theater's performance will begin soon. She continued the conversation as they walked. She pointed out that he could have strongly refused the marriage. In response, he shared that he believed it was his duty to reassure the king and the people, since he is but well loved. She countered his statement and noted that people will love him, everyone will oppose and worry about the marriage, but the Duke only replied that regardless of that they'll be rest assured, because he will never be able to draw a sword on his two elder brothers. Just like the third prince said, the people gathered around the theater covered their mouths in awe. The third prince is going to the theater with a woman? Inside, they resumed their conversation as he adjusted a seat. To ensure their peaceful marriage and to relieve the king's worries, he wanted her to promise a few things. He doesn't intend to carry that marriage for life, he expects it will bring more losses than benefits. Until the wedding day, they will enjoy casual dating. On their next meeting they'll hold hands, by the fourth meeting they'll share a light kiss. She didn't react well to the section about the kiss, prompting the Duke to tease her, mentioning they were lovers in a marriage for arrangement after all. She pressed her eyes shut in frustration, she couldn't get what he was thinking. She thought they'd talk about proper conduct as a duchess, what she should and shouldn't do, but now he's telling her to kiss? Just then the Duke's voice came again. This time he admitted that he didn't want the marriage to look forced, neither does he want it to appear like he's doing it because she caught his weakness. Instead, the marriage must proceed because they both want it. She agreed and he continued. He revealed that he intended to behave like any ordinary lover, asking her to do some research on that part as well. He mentioned that after their wedding, their first night together will be limited to about a week, adding that that should show their relationship isn't that bad. She shrieked, "The first night?" She'd never imagined that. The Duke, noticing her reaction, doesn't miss the opportunity to tease her. He remarked that there was nothing shameful about a husband and wife sharing a bed, but she responded, pointing out that if it came up on the first date, it could be embarrassing. "Excuse me. Please understand it. I want to finish this boring negotiation quickly," he spat. He noticed the people clapping and realized the okay had come to an end, then he asked that they consider the remaining conversation at Evergreen. There, he told her after the first week, they'd adjust schedules to decide which night to spend in the bedroom. He also mentioned that having a child should be planned for about 6 months later. She paused at those words, a child? Having a child for the family is natural, but in an arranged marriage. The Duke noticed the shift in her mood and immediately asked if there was something wrong with having a child. She admitted that it felt strange, asking if that marriage wasn't supposed to last only until the power struggle ends. She asked why then he wanted a child from her, asking if it wouldn't be better to have a child with a future wife later, but the Duke only noted, "Whether I remarry or not, a child is necessary. If a child from a crazy woman is titled as young Duke, no one will bother with the Myers Duchy." Hearing those words, a sharp pain shot through her chest. She now realized it from his words, why exactly he accepted the marriage and what he thinks of her. For him, their marriage is merely a means to reassure the king, his brother, and the people. Therefore, in his eyes, her existence as Edith Reynolds is naturally just an obstacle causing an unwanted marriage. Her hands began trembling and she managed to force the words out, pointing out that his words were quite harsh. He asked if it hurt to hear that and she said yes, then he apologized, telling her he'll be more careful from then on. He offered to clarify his words and explained that he didn't mean he'd think of the child that way, he only meant that others might perceive it that way, and she responded saying she understood. However, deep in her mind, she concluded, she will never have a child. She couldn't imagine it, the thought that a child she's never imagined might be treated like that because of her was so horrifying. As a result, she and the Duke will never maintain a lifelong marriage because she intends to just achieve her goal and then divorce. The Duke, on the other hand, settled his teacup on the table, also with a crippling realization that he'd made a mistake. He'd only spoken the reality shown to others, so he never thought it would be so hurtful. He glanced up at her as he pondered on how he'd never apologized to anyone in his life, yet, within only a few hours of meeting her, he said those words 3 times. Without realizing it because he felt so sorry for her who was trying not to cry. He moved on and mentioned that if they got married she would be invited to various places and she didn't have to attend all of them, she only needed to go to the important ones. She followed with a question asking what she could do as Duchess. She brought up holding parties, buying lots of clothes and meeting people, if she could do the things a typical Duchess does. The Duke responded stating she asks what's obvious and assured her if she fulfills her duties as Duchess she can also enjoy her rights. She asked if there was anything else she needed to be aware of, like maintaining the dignity of a Duchess or behaving properly, but he shut her down immediately saying he doesn't expect any of those from her. She responded with a simple, "I see." While the Duke's gaze remained fixed on her, he wondered if he'd made another mistake, thinking there was nothing wrong in living as she pleases, right? A smile touched her lips as she suddenly commented that his conditions aren't difficult. Then she considered, maybe the reputation of being a madwoman wasn't entirely bad. If he intends to bear her madness, then, she won't be cast out for acting a little self-indulgently. She flashed him a smile the next minute promising to fulfill her duties and reminded him to keep to his promise to guarantee her rights. Time passed quickly and before she knew it, she stood in front of the Marquis mansion with the Duke. He stood with a smile and asked that the next time they meet they call each other by their names. His unexpected request left her stunned. She wondered if it wasn't too soon to start addressing each other by their names. Of course she hated being called Reynolds, but it was different with him, calling him Grayson. She practiced calling him by his name over and over in her head, and when she finally opened her eyes, before she could prepare herself, the Duke leaned in and whispered a gentle, "Good night," sending heat straight to her cheeks. He ended saying it was a pleasure before leaving in his carriage. My thought guys, isn't it too soon for FL to be feeling butterflies, like E? The Duke arrived at his manor holding a parasol. His butler noticed and asked if he should take it to the lady, but the Duke refused, saying he'll give it to her himself next time. Also, once he stepped into his manor, a maid stretched out her hand asking to put away his parasol, and again he refused her. This time he noted he'll do this one himself. Later, Lady Helena Windsor, Grayson's nurse and lady-in-waiting, walks in with tea. She brings up his date with the lady, and asks if she hadn't done anything rough, and the Duke calmly responds that unlike the rumors, she was quite smart and sensible. She found his words about her questionable. After all, she'd done such at a party attended by the Queen, stomping on the Countess's daughter so hard her bone broke. However, the Duke's thought was quite different. He thought she was an extraordinary woman. That she knew how to express her feelings accurately. With just a single word that their rumor is unpleasant, she was smart enough to figure out what makes him uncomfortable. Also, she was surprisingly a cute woman. After meeting her today, he suddenly feels there might be a reason for her actions. The night wasn't so pleasant for Edith. A maid grabbed her hand, pulling her behind her while she asked her to let her go. The maid flashed a defiant smile as she responded, saying she'll let her go only on the condition that she behaved well afterwards. She followed with a question too, asking if she believed she wanted to treat her that way. Edith gave her response within her, yes, she knew without doubt Emma wanted to do that. Emma always enjoyed treating her badly. It seemed she greatly enjoyed the fact that she, a commoner, had a noble she could treat as she pleased. Besides, Emma, her tone went cold. That day, why did you go there? I mean last January, the day my mother fell from the temple spire. The maid turns defensive, demanding to know what that means, but Edith doesn't back down either. She offers to explain better and mentions that when the apprentice priest had reported her mother's death, several people had gone to identify her. Wyatt Reynolds, Mateo, Lillian and Emma. Emma's face tightens and she tells her she doesn't know why she's suddenly bringing that up. After all, it's already been a year. Edith with an innocent look admits she'd only suddenly become curious, but deep within her, she knew the only reason she couldn't ask up until now was because she had to protect her own life. Besides that, the Marquis had eyes everywhere, and without any real power her words carried less weight than a tabloid article. She slowly lifted her gaze as she raised a question in her mind. "Lillian, Emma, why did you go there?" The Marquis Mateo and I would have been enough to confirm it. Outside her thoughts, Emma turned away with a casual remark that she was always curious about the strangest things, advising her to think about how not to be abandoned by the Duke rather than wasting her thoughts on nonsense. She followed behind Emma, and the minute she stepped into the hall, she was greeted with a question from the Marquis asking if she'd enjoyed a pleasant time with the Duke. Retaining her composure, she says yes, she spent a lovely time with him without any problems. However, a smirk appeared on her lips the next minute as she clung to a new resolve: until the day they all walk through the hell she's living, she'll make sure to hold on tightly to the Marquis. Over dinner, the elder son of the Marquis advised her to move with caution and act obediently, saying even if the wedding date has been set, they might break off the engagement from their side. She gave a gentle nod, and suddenly, almost out of the blue, a remark came: "She'll definitely get dumped." The Marquis flew into a rage. He warned Frederick not to speak such nonsense, noting his dear sister was about to get married into a fine family, and if that was all he had to say. Frederick pressed his teeth together. "Sister, huh?" Then the next minute he snapped, declaring that she's never been his sister. He asked if they really believed the Duke agreed to the marriage willingly. His elder brother shot him a stern look as he warned him not to speak to their father that way. He asked him to sit, however Frederick simply turned away, claiming he'd lost his appetite. Silence filled the room, and as she ate she silently considered how the Marquis must have finally realized it by now, that if the Duke so much as wants to, he can break off the engagement at any moment. Grayson Riley Myers, a man who currently runs the most renowned department store of the continent. He graduated top of his class from the Royal Academy of Science in just 5 years. A man who resolved a dispute with the Kingdom of Eads before even reaching adulthood. Such a man would never marry against his will simply because the king commanded it. Snapping her out of her thoughts, she hears the Marquis call her and follow with a question asking if the Duke seems to have some affection for her. She paused to think about it. It didn't seem like he cared about affection. What mattered to him was whether she was useful or not, but nevertheless, she responded with a simple maybe. The Marquis agreed, claiming her face was beautiful enough. However, he stressed the fact that being pretty alone doesn't move a man's heart, and she with a smile responded that she was aware. Julia, who'd been sitting in silence, suddenly spoke. She demanded to know why Edith was looking at her that way. The Marquis, sensing this, immediately asks her to stay out of it, and when she tries to explain herself he shuts her down instantly. Julia bit her lip in anger, having to sit through his humiliation, while Edith snuck a glance at her and thought, "You must be jealous, Julia. Unlike you, who had to marry an old man for the sake of your family, I'm marrying Duke Myers no matter what." 4 years ago, Count Senior brought his daughter Julia to Marquis Reynolds, asking that she be allowed to learn and grow under his guidance. Thanks to the vast story Count Senior brought, Julia won the Marquis's favor and soon started walking around the estate as though she were the lady of the house, even treating her mother as though she were her personal maid. However, in her mother's diary she wrote this: "The Seymours' family gold mines are running dry." Julia hid the fact that her family's mines were nearly depleted, and Marquis Reynolds, unaware, was already making business plans to exploit them. Outside her thoughts, the Marquis urges her to think carefully, since the marriage benefits her more than it does him, so she just never lets it fall apart. However, didn't settle with her. From the Marquis' words, it seemed as though he didn't care whatever happened after the wedding, but only about reaching it. Curious, she asks him what if after the ceremony the Duke demands a divorce. This time her brother responded. His tone bore a hint of annoyance as he asked what she meant by that question. He reminded her divorce will only bring shame to their family as well, warning her to be careful. The scene shifts to father and son having a secret meeting. He asks the Marquis if he's really planning on sending Edith out of the mansion, bringing up the possibility of her saying something foolish to the Duke, but the Marquis doesn't panic. In a calm voice he replied that she wouldn't have the chance. Whatever that wretch might be hiding inside, she wouldn't live long enough to speak of it. She'll be dead before that. When the bride and groom share their toast, Edith will drink the wine laced with Flarin poison and die instantly. It's a deadly toxin. She wouldn't even be able to utter a word before it kills her. The culprit will be a woman secretly in love with the Duke. How useful it is that Duke Myers happens to be so popular. And if that were to happen, neither the royal family nor the Duke's house would be able to raise their heads before us. With Edith's death, we might even gain a few more things from it. Listen well, Mateo, this is how you use people. That's all for now. Thank you guys for watching and don't forget to leave a like, comment and share.